What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Community Farm Alliance Podcast. I'm your host for the Blackberry series. My name is Vaughn Barnes, and I have with me today Dr. Tommy Parker of Urban Eco Farms out of Jefferson County.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, how'd you get the farm started, man?
Man, I've been around farming my whole life. I came home. I'm a professor at a university. And when everything shifted because of COVID to being at home and online classes,
Right.
I, was doing the online classes, and I'd already had a very large garden, big enough that we supplied stuff to the church. We supplied things to the people in the neighborhood. And so what I wanted to do was actually kind of venture out, man. So I wanted to start a hoop house and an aquaponics system. So what I did was I was like, hey, I got this spare time. I just started building it. So I came up with the idea. Urban eco is because my research has always been on urban ecology. So that's where the urban eco comes from. And so I've had and I still do have a consulting firm, Urban Eco Consulting. And so we just moved that over into Urban Eco Farms. So it's been 3 years now that just started putting together the greenhouse and the aquaponics system. So it was kind of a work in progress for many years before that. And when I had that spare time, man, we started with a hoop house that it's what 10 by 20, 10
Wow.
10 wide, 20 long, um 8 feet tall. And so we just kind of got started with that, and we've been blessed. It just continued to grow.
The thing that I always find so interesting about urban farmers like myself is that we make a lot with the little that we have, and that's like the magic of urban farming and urban agriculture. You talked about this off, but I want to go into it like I always do. History. How much history does your family have with agriculture?
In terms of agriculture, my family, of course, like a lot of Black or African American families, were sharecroppers, right? I'm from
Woo.
Tennessee. And we used to call it going to the country. You know,
Right.
you go to the country to what was the little farmland, and you passed by the big house. Then you went back to the little house. And, you had a small amount of acreage there, and my family would, do stuff there. But I also had another side of agriculture, was that my father and grandfather both worked in packing houses. And so I kind of had the whole plant side of agriculture. Then I had the animal side. And so I grew up in the city of Memphis, and just so happens behind the area we lived, there was an area that it would probably flood almost up to about 300 yards behind the house. But back there was several acres that what we did was that my grandfather had got out with the tiller, man, and I was tilling at 9 years old. I was tilling a couple acres, back then
Wow.
in the middle of a city. So we're talking about in the 70s. I'm dating myself, but in the 70s, doing this before you had a lot of people that really became interested in urban farming. So you had that family history there. Then I had that history of urban farming. Then, parents working in packing houses. So I kind of always had agriculture around me. And it kind of drove where I went in terms of academics as
Education.
well.
Yeah. I could see that because you already mentioned, the amount of research that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about what was the key things that made that passion start for you?
You know, I get asked that quite a bit. And here's the reality for me. I can't, because I've never done anything else. Even in high school, I was a biology major. When I went to college, I went to an HBCU, Mississippi Valley State. I was a biology major, but I wasn't pre-med. I wasn't pre-dentistry. I wasn't any of the pre-professional uh, types of tracks, and I just never fit in. You know, I never fit in. I used to find myself spending times going out in the fields doing stuff where everybody else was more lab oriented, right? And so if you were not around one of the 1890 schools, the HBCUs that had ag schools, you kind of felt out of place, right? But after I finished and I was playing sports there at Mississippi Valley State. Then I ended up leaving there, going to University of Memphis, but at that time, Memphis State. But they had agricultural type research and stuff. And that's where I also began to realize this is where I fit in. So, but I also had a passion for urban ecology, right? So how do people deal with the ecological phenomena that we see, but in urban settings? So
Right.
I started doing research on urban ecology in 1994.
Wow.
And yeah, so I've always looked at how do you deal with this intersect between what's going on in the natural environment while also trying to meet the needs of an urban area. So one of the things that I did, one of my first, my thesis for my master's was food habits of coyotes in urban areas. And so we used to work on, how not just do you get energy coming into urban areas, but
Mhm.
also how do we look at animals surviving in urban areas? And I'm not talking about your things that you see when you go to the park, but other animals such as coyotes, such as bobcat, fox, deer, these things that aren't necessarily, well, what at that time necessarily associated with um with being a wildlife in urban settings. So everything that I've kind of done has always dealt with some level of ecology and agriculture within urban settings.
Did you know that CFA is a nonprofit organization that supports family farms, equity work, food access, and policy work across Kentucky? If you're interested in supporting any of this work, please go to cfaky.org and go to our donate tab in order to donate or become a member today. We really appreciate any and all help that we get, and it goes back to helping both farmers and consumers across the Bluegrass State. For more information, go to www.cfaky.org. Once again, that's www.cfaky.org. Thank you. And now back to our show.
Or before the break, you started talking about animals leaving the forest and then ended up in the city, and this where your research was at.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that even important? Why should the urban farm care about that issue?
Every urban farmer I've talked to has dealt with, first off, if you live in a city, you have to have resources, right? And those resources can come from far away, or, as you know, being an urban farmer, they can be right here. Now, the process of having them right here with you has very little impact. Yeah, let me rephrase. It has reduced impact, right? Because you don't have to use gas. You don't, put more carbons into the environment. But one of the other things is that not having to expand urban areas. If you have everything what you have right here, then you don't have to expand, right? As you expand an urban area, you begin to have to intersect more with natural areas, right? Because they have to be converted for human use.
Right.
Well, the more area you convert to human use, now you're going to have to deal with, and not just animals, but you have to deal with those species that are associated with more rural areas. Now they have to make an adaptation to live within an urban setting, right? So as you do that, what happens is they have adaptations. We have to interact with them. And there are those things that we interact with that can disrupt food chains. Let's
Can you
take,
give can you
go
give an
ahead.
example? Can you give an example?
Yeah. Let's say you continue to grow urban areas, right? And that process is called urbanization. As urbanization continues to increase, right? Let's say you begin to bring in deer. Now we know we have a problem with deer in urban areas, right? But deer in urban areas tend to eat many of the things that people put in that we use in terms of vegetation.
Right.
Let's look at one of the biggest projects I worked on, and this was my whole doctoral work. Everybody's familiar with the White House. Everybody's familiar with the park right in front of the White House, right? Lafayette Park.
Right.
Lafayette Park has the highest squirrel densities in the world. Why? People used to come and feed them. People used to sell bags of food to feed them, right? But look at this. The National Park Service, who takes care of those parks, right? They put out ornamental flowers. They put out all these things. Well, if you have these really high concentrations of animal density right there, they will devour those, right? So what the
Mm,
national park found was that they were spending in excess of $40,000 a year just
wow.
trying to keep up with making that park look nice. And this was because of high squirrel densities. Now, let's take that. We have people who live in urban areas who have chickens, right? Well, now let's say you have you have fox in these urban areas, or you have coyotes coming in these urban areas, right? As a matter of fact, I saw a coyote 2 days ago in West Louisville. And it's funny because as it ran across the street, I looked and I was like, oh, look, there's a coyote going across the street. Most people are going to think, oh, they're just a stray dog, right? Well, what happens with that? They have a panache for getting into food sources, right?
Mm.
And not to mention if you have small dogs or these other things. So the more urban areas begin to expand, the more they're going to have human wildlife interactions.
You talk about the coyote in the West End showing up looking for food. Ironically, that brings my thoughts to food insecurity.
Mhm.
How do you address food insecurity when you have this problem of animals coming into the spaces where people are trying to grow?
Food insecurity, uh, and I have to go really deep, and this isn't going to be philosophical, but it is going to be historical. When we look at food insecurity, we tend to think that this is a novel problem for areas that um, may not be very high social economically, right?
Right.
But what people forget was food insecurity is what drove Japan to join with Germany in World War II. Because, and the reason I'm saying this is because I've spent a lot of time in Japan, being advising and talking to their leadership, and that's because islands have the biggest food insecurity problem that you'll ever have. Why am I talking about that? Well, when you look at an urban setting, right, you have areas that may not have, all the resources they need, surrounded by, areas
Yeah.
that do have those things that they need, right? So these are little islands within an urban setting, right? So what we see are the same patterns that you'll get on islands. So while in Japan, and let's talk about this. Well, let me say this. when you look at urban farming, you mentioned earlier that we do a lot with little footprint, right?
Right.
Well, how do we do that? We go up, right? We
Vertical.
do vertical.
Yes.
These are the same things that you see happening on islands. Japan, they do a lot vertically, not just in agriculture, but everything that they do. Instead of owning big, spans of homes, they have homes that are vertical, right? When it comes to their agriculture, they do vertical. And so you see this in areas there, Germany, a lot of places, and this is really sad to say, but that have been war torn and had their infrastructure removed. And so in doing that, it allowed them to redo their infrastructure and build upwards instead of outwards. Well, food insecurity in urban areas is the same thing. And I mean, we're talking social issue, economic issues, a philosophical issue. So we have to attack all sides of that. We can't just say, and hey, let's put a grocery store over here. Let's start planning. And a lot of funding goes towards, hey, give somebody some money to put a store in this food insecure area. But you have to work on all these other things, because you put a store there, they have to carry things that are going to be good. But here's the other part. What you see when you're dealing with food insecure areas, you get trained to not want healthy choices because those healthy choices haven't been there. And so the patterns of what you eat haven't been established. So to wrap that up, we have to work on the philosophical issues that are surrounded by food insecure areas. We have to work on the economic issues. We have to work on the social issues. And one of the things in food insecure areas, what you'll find is that there is a lot of negative human wildlife interaction. So all those things go together, and we can't keep trying to deal with one or two and not deal with the entire cluster of what we're seeing.
Farmers markets support program services. Did you know that a program like this exists in the state of Kentucky? If your market has been around for a while, or maybe you are a new and existing market, we offer marketing development. We also offer business development. We want to offer programs as such like capital support to support your market managers. There's a cost share program. We can establish your market with the SNAP EBT program. And lastly, we provide networking. For more information, please contact us at cfaky.org/FMSP. Again, that is cfaky.org/FMSP.
You were on the horticulture board.
I am.
Right. And you guys put on what conference? The
state horticulture fruit and vegetable conference.
Yes. So the fruit and vegetable conference that happened down in Bowling Green.
Correct.
That's your stuff. Talk a little bit about it.
It's just that it's the State Horticulture Society. So that society, what it does is it brings together people who basically provide vegetables and fruits for the state. It has training opportunities. It has people who give talks there, what we're doing, what we want to do. You have vendors, of course, at every conference. But I think one of the things that I think Kentucky does really well is really putting conscious efforts into getting people together. We try and have it and this is my first year on the board, but from what I can tell is we like to have it in a central location so it can bring everybody from the state. We try to get together with people that there's a part that focuses just on vegetables, there's part that focuses on fruits. Kentucky State is very active with it. University of Kentucky is very active with it. Murray State. And the reason I'm mentioning those three is because those are the three ag schools here in the state of Kentucky.
Right.
But one of the things I am really proud of is seeing how active Kentucky State is as an HBCU in dealing with everything from the state. Because, I mean, again, it is a look over jewel. And myself, and I'll say this, I just
Amen.
recently received a grant from Kentucky State to expand the farm. So, as a matter of fact, I spent today picking out information. I think I told you earlier about the size of the greenhouse I started with. Right now,
Right.
I'm literally building one that's going to be 20 by 70 feet long. That's going to take we're going to sixfold. It's going to increase our production by 600%. So it's allowing us to really, really expand and do some things, bring in some other people. I'm looking at bringing in, we have a website that is very active. I'm looking at building an app. And one of the things I want to do in this app is also when I proposed the app, it was to be able to also service some of these food insecure areas. And that was actually the area that I got the grant in under food insecurity.
So you said you plan on hiring. What would the situation look like if somebody was trying to get hired by you?
Effort. And I say that facetiously, but we have a couple of things you're dealing with. One, just the state of trying to hire someone in our current work climate, right? But two, I want someone that's actually interested in agriculture. And you don't have to necessarily be someone that has this background in it, because, people come from different backgrounds all the time,
Right.
but you have to have the capacity to understand that everything that you want to learn or everything that you have learned through reading is going to be a little bit different when you get to application of some of these things. So I try and look for people that really want to soak up some knowledge. And the reason I say that is I'm on a lot of groups where people talk about growing things. And as a biologist, one of the things I remind people that plants were not put here to have all of the requirements that they need at 100% capacity at all times. In other words, and there's a plant, and I encourage everybody to look at this, that one of the things that makes plants, vegetables, and fruits taste better is undergoing some level of stress. And if you deny them that stress, then you'll get a nice looking plant, but it won't be as flavorful. And so one of the types of people that know this is wine growers, grape growers for wine. They'll tell you the grapes that have been through the most stress produce the most flavorful wines. And we have to understand that as ag people.
I totally get you, man. That brings on so many different avenues of where my initial question was gonna go. Because I wasn't thinking about the stress of the plant to produce a better fruit or a better harvest. But because even pruning, I mean, you got to prune plants to increase your yield, and that's adding stress to it. So
That's
uh,
exactly it.
that, like you said, that's it. Now we run in almost to the end of the podcast, but this is where I get to ask my questions
All right.
that might be little curveballs. But your name is Dr. Tommy Parker. Where'd that
Mm-hmm.
doctor part come from?
From having a PhD in ecology. So my academic background is that I have a bachelor's from the University of Memphis. It is organismal biology. I have a master's from the University of Memphis in zoology and another in statistics. And then my doctoral work is from University of Missouri, and that is in ecology. So,
And you spent a lot of time, I forgot how many years you said, but studying urban ecology,
that's right.
right?
Ever since 1994.
Golly. I mean, in
Yeah.
1994, I was a kid in New Jersey, not knowing nothing about anything.
Oh man, yeah, I'm an old head, bro. I'm an old head, man. When the just I mean briefly, the science of urban ecology has really grown since I've seen it come in. Uh, we have the National Science Foundation initially set up two areas to be long-term ecological research stations that study urban ecology. That was Baltimore, Maryland, and Phoenix, Arizona. So since that time, what we've developed is this really robust body of knowledge on how do you get energy and things into urban areas, and how do you supply not just food but the psychological impacts of the urban environment in regards to food deserts, in regards to human wildlife interaction. So there, and this is one of the biggest things that came out of this. What people don't know is that if you look at hospitals and areas for human health, now you see a bigger green footprint with those. They have more greenery around, more sitting areas. You can look out of your hospital and see more green. What came out of that is a understanding that being around nature helps helps your body. So not just so we talk about urban farming, there's also a psychological part to this. There's also a health part to this. So,
That's right.
and you're providing a food source. So there's so many benefits of this that, some of it can be measured. There's some things that we actually can't measure, but the reality is that urban ag has this multi-layered benefit to its existence. So we have to not just continue this, but we have to continue to grow it, because we're gonna keep making more people. People are gonna need
Man,
food. People are gonna need somewhere to stay. So we have to understand that, how do we continue to do this with this reduced footprint?
now I just finished doing a talk, and in my talk, in the research, I put out the information that the USDA released, that 7 point whatever $million towards urban ag, and they're just now starting to get on the ball with it. So for anybody that's listening, just know urban ag is a thing that the USDA is getting behind. So
Yes.
there's money there. Before the urban ag talk, you mentioned plants that were distressed, and then viticulture with all the vines and grapes. It makes me think back to my favorite question. This is the Black or Berry series.
All right.
Dr. Parker, what berry best represents you or your farm?
Elderberry. Did I throw you off with that one? You thought you was gonna get blueberry, strawberry, or something like that, didn't you?
Nah, you already said you was an OG, so you said elderberry.
Elder.
Now, why
Let me tell you why,
elderberry?
man.
Why
Let me tell you
elderberry?
why. That elderberry is in so many people's yards that they have no clue what they be stepping on, man. And what's this? In about another what 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, they gonna have elderberry everywhere, man, and they have no idea how good that thing is for you, how sweet it tastes. You know, elderberry is strong. And what's funny is that, you know, and I'm finna go real black on, you know, black people, we've been hitting that elderberry for the longest. And now, you know, when the general society catch hold to it, it's elderberry juice now, elderberry jam. Everybody got something with elderberry, you know, and now, you know, they people coming up talking to me about it. I'm like, oh, y'all late to the party. Y'all, just like y'all, you know, everybody talking about cocoa butter. Oh yeah, cocoa butter been see? you
Yeah.
know, you know, so
Everybody does have some type of elderberry something, man.
right, right. You know, so it's like, yeah, this ain't nothing new. I can't remember what my grandmama and them used to call it, but they used to have it. And when I started seeing people talking about it, I was like, yeah, my grandparents had taught me about that, you know. So, you know, I tell them about that and they say, next you're gonna come talking to me about you grow poke salad, ain't you?
Oh
But
my
that's a whole
oh my gosh. So the my last question, um talk a little bit about HBCUs. Every now and then I feel the urge to like try to spread the knowledge and the joy of, you know, it's a luxury to have one here.
it
Because
is.
if you look at all your 1890 schools, there's only it was what, 19?
Yeah, yeah.
Compared to your 1862s, it was
Bruh,
57.
man. Look, you know, and they made sure every state had one. But when it came to the HBCUs 1890s, every state didn't get one. But you
Facts.
know, and for those who might not know, so these are those ag schools. Everybody understands what a historically black college or university is, HBCU, right? So this goes back to when African Americans could not go to college with white Americans, right? So HBCUs were invented. And these HBCUs primarily, believe it or not, serve to train teachers and medical staff. But we also had that need for agriculture and mechanics. So when you're looking at a lot of schools, when you see that A and M behind it, is because it was an agricultural school and a mechanical school. Because when you think about it back in those days, these were the primary necessities for society. You had to
Right.
have food, then you had to have mechanical inclined individuals to take care of the equipment to harvest and plant foods, right? So the HBCUs, and I love my HBCUs, but there are a lot of them don't really focus on agriculture. But I will say this: those that focus on agriculture really do a good job at it. Kentucky State, being that we're here in Kentucky, is one that really comes to mind. Then you have Southern University. You have Alabama A&M. They're
South
so
Carolina State
yep,
University.
yep, yep.
Uh,
Uh,
what's the one
North
in Washington?
Carolina A&T.
Yeah,
Um,
gotta know that one.
yeah. So
West
these
Virginia,
HBCUs, man,
Virginia.
the agriculture in there has really driven a lot of what we see in African American culture in terms of the agricultural part of that. Everybody knows George Washington Carver. You know, he has this history with Tuskegee, but you know that that greatness, what a lot of people don't know, was also taken to Iowa State. You
Mm,
know, he did a lot of his work at Iowa State. They came and got him. So Iowa State back in the day realized the greatness of HBCUs. And there are a lot of, you'll have a lot of PWI, primarily white institutions that had these relationships with HBCUs. And a lot of it was, uh, and I know this is a very common thing, but a lot of it was because that greatness was coming out of that HBCU, so they would bring that in to their fold to kind of I don't want to say it wasn't a matter of stealing knowledge, but definitely bring it under that fold. Because one of the things as a research scientist at a university, what a lot of people don't understand is that universities are here to generate knowledge. So when you open up a book, someone had to figure that information out and put it to test and read and write it, right? So the HBCUs serve as that kind of mecca for Black America. So they have a very rich history in agriculture, and it's going to just get even better. One of the big things that a lot of people, you probably already know with Tuskegee, oh wow, don't even fly these anymore. But Tuskegee was sending up agriculture experiments on the space shuttle. Did you know that?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, they used to set up a lot of ag experiments because I think from my time with the government was that when you're dealing with agriculture, you don't deal with it like you would your individual things. My background was I was the endangered species biologist for the eastern region of the U.S. So that was the states had to interact with Maine to Minnesota to Missouri back over to the Atlantic Ocean. So those 22 states, right? And one of the things that people did not understand is that when you're dealing with agriculture on that level, you're thinking 10 and 20 years out, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
as an HBCU, Tuskegee had gotten on that curve and understood that whatever is going to happen with the population of humans, we're going to always need to provide food. So they began getting into sending these experiments into space because what you saw was extreme environments, right? Now we could talk about, well, this is how you could handle, growing agriculture if you have to colonize another planet, moon, or anything. But one of the things that really came from that was understanding how you can grow agriculture in extreme environments. And the reality is this: as this planet ain't gonna get bigger, but the population is going to get bigger, which means everybody's going to have a little bit of smaller and smaller slice of this planet, right? So what we have to understand is that the more stress we put on the planet, the more stress that plants are going to undergo. So a lot of these HBCUs were historically kept out of that arena, even though having some of the most brilliant minds was still kept out of that arena from being able to participate in generating this knowledge. But what is happening now is that we've seen a shift, and we're talking historically, right? So we're talking about the last 30, 40 years, right? It was a slow shift 40 years ago. Now you're beginning to see this really, really deep shift in dealing with HBCUs on a larger scale in regards to research. Now, this also goes into, several lawsuits by HBCUs to get treated fairly. This also is going to play a big part. And this is what we kind of have to talk about, this whole ripple effect. A lot of people never thought about the effect of the lawsuit that Black farmers won against the USDA, right?
Right.
Well, these Black farmers really are associated with HBCUs when you look at just historically, right? I have stories on trying to deal with extension offices and not being really treated as an equal, but the HBCU's extension offices really dealt with what African American communities needed in regards to agriculture. And just to clarify, an extension office is an office in an agricultural school that specifically deals with interacting with the community and getting this knowledge to the community, helping them get established, be it farming, family, housing, or anything. It has all these different these different facets to it. But what we're talking about specifically is the ag extensions. And so I think Kentucky State does really, really well in their ag extension and interacting with the community. Tennessee State, which is another one of those 1890s, they do really well with interacting with their community. Southern University, HBCU in Louisiana, they have a strong urban forestry program that provides foresters for many cities. I worked with one when I was the ecologist for the city of Kansas City, who's from Southern. North Carolina A&T, they have a really, really strong ag program that works with their community. I know people from Spartanburg, South Carolina, where South Carolina State is. I've worked with people in several counties that have dealt with their extension officers. So what you find is those extension offices work really well with everybody in the public. Whereas when you go to many of the PWI's extension offices, they've had some challenges in regards to that. And I'll say this, each county, whatever state you live in, has an extension office. So if you need some help with anything in regards to agriculture, that should be your first stop. And it's not that, oh, they help you if they want to. Their primary charge is to help you. So this is why I love HBCUs, because they are very, they're like our people. They're going to help you.
Man, you put a cherry whipped cream and then another cherry on top of the cake. Everybody, that was the end of the episode. I want to thank you all for watching and learning from Dr. Tommy Parker. And I hope you enjoyed this podcast. But as I always say, real change comes from the ground up. Until next time, peace.